happened was, I mean, there's not. I've told you pretty much all there is to tell. We did this tour, which started. I guess it started in 2010, March of 2010, and so towards the end of the tour, just as a sort of thank you to all the fans that we accumulated over a year and about almost a year, I think it was 17 months altogether. And we thought, well, we should make a DVD of one of these shows. And there was this company, Eagle Rock, who was willing to do it and put it out. So I was trying to think of a place to do it, and we were finally going to play in Stoke-on-Trent, which is where I was raised as a kid. And I thought, we should do it there. I've never played there before. And I've always wanted to play there, and plus I haven't been there in like 40 years. So we decided to do it there. And, so it was sort of like it had a sentimental value to it for me, and like that.
Do you remember a lot about, I knew you lived in England, you were born there, and you lived there for how long?
I was born in London, in Hampstead. But my family lived in Stoke-on-Trent, so I went straight from London, I think, to Los Angeles for a minute, and then went back to Stoke-on-Trent. So I lived there till I was like 5 or 6 years old.
So you have memories of it?
Oh, yeah, very, very vivid memories.
Really?
Yeah, because it's. I think when you're that age, now that I've got kids, I can sort of see what goes on. You're very impressionable, so you take in a lot of information that you retain at that point. Either that, or I just have a really good memory, which I doubt that's the case. And so yeah, I had very tight knit community there, and everybody sort of knows each other, a lot of family, and it's just a really beautiful small sort of town kind of thing. And so yeah, I have a lot of very crystal clear memories from that.
And you were telling me when I saw you in LA about a month ago that you actually wanted to do a gig in what is technically your hometown for a long time, but it's such a small town you couldn't really find a promoter or a venue that was right.
Nobody was interested. It was almost like I never got a response to that question. It was like, let's play in Stoke.
And just silence.
Anyway, so yeah, like that.
Well, what's the nearest major city that you would play if it wasn't Stoke?
Well, it's in the Midlands, so like Manchester.
Okay.
So every time I play in Manchester, my Uncle Ian and a couple of folks that I'm related to, or like family friends, come down to Manchester when we play there. So,
because when you were telling me that story, and then I watched the little bit of the DVD today, I was really surprised because I was expecting to see a venue that looked like a dump or something, but it looks like a really nice venue that was there.
Yeah, and it's been there for a long time, and people do go through there and play. So it's not like it just materialized out of nowhere suddenly. But I think because I was so persistent about it, they were like, okay, well, there is a place you can go play there, and it turns out a lot of people play there. But it's basically it used to be Town Hall, and so it's a really nice theater, beautiful room and stuff. And the only drawback is all the dressing rooms are holding cells.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the old school red brick with bars on the windows, and very small and very hot.
Got a little flashback to your days when you weren't on the up and up?
Yeah, right. So I come full circle. Yeah.
We're talking live with Slash. It's Eddie Trunk. The new CD is called Made in Stoke. Recorded just this past July. It's kind of a quick turnaround for a live record.
Yeah, well, it didn't take anything. We actually mixed it and stuff while it was still on the road. And so it was done before I even got home, and we just had to put a package on it and, put it out.
I was telling you this, I think, on the TV show. I'm a huge fan of live records, even to this day.
Same here.
And I grew up with them like you did.
Well, that's because we're huge, big-time rock fans.
Right, and we're around the same age when in the 70s, the live album was like the epic career-making record, and unfortunately, I don't really think a lot of them have registered on the radar since the 70s, with a few exceptions. Why do you think that is?
It's weird. I think in the 70s, for me, like a good judge of a band that I wasn't really familiar with, rather than go out and try and obtain their whole catalog, I would just get the live record. Because that, to me, was the best indication of how good a band was, and all the songs are on there, and there you have it. So, and there was a lot of live records, and it was very popular up until, like the late 70s, early 80s, and then it just died out. And I'm not really sure why. Maybe because the whole sort of arena rock experience, or even the club experience, just sort of died there for a minute. There was a period in the '80s where it got really weird.
Well, if you think about it too, and this just hit me while we're talking, is technology could have played a role too, because you got bootlegs in the phones. I mean, maybe everybody's documenting everything so much that,
that's true too.
It's not as special. But to me, having that live, having the packaging, looking through the booklet, I mean, that's what takes me back. Some of my favorite albums of all time are live records.
Right. Well, another thing, though, that happened was originally live albums that came out in the early 70s were really bare bones, honest, like wear the shit on your shirt sleeve kind of thing. And then people started to get paranoid and overproducing them as well. And, like some live records that were coming out were not live records in any sense of the word. They just had an audience on them. So maybe people just got really paranoid about being honest about their live performance as well.
There are live albums where the applause track isn't even really from that show. They've taken it from other records.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a few of them. I'm not going to name any names.
Oh, they've been named. A lot of them, the artists themselves have even called it out, over the years. So, It's not a huge secret, but it's still captured in energy no matter how much doctoring was done and improved on the studio stuff.
If you're at a party, right, and someone puts a really good live record on, to me that's like the best energy you can have at a party, as opposed to just like some regular record. If you put a live thing on, it just sounds cool. But, that's me.
How did you deal with that, with this being your first live record on your own outside of Guns? Did you, leave it as is, as they say, warts and all, or did you go in and touch some stuff up?
No, we just left it as is. And the funny thing about that particular show is, the band's pretty tight. Very frenetic energy that the band has, but we managed to play well even at that tempo. And it was one of the few gigs where we made all kinds of dumb mistakes during the song. So that's sort of the character of the whole thing. You just have to leave it in there. We wouldn't have made the mistakes if it weren't for the fact that there was somebody recording it. That's Murphy's Law, So yeah, you got to keep all that stuff in there. It gives it the character that was that unique thing that night,
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's what makes these things special. Even when you see live DVDs and you can tell the whole thing was just completely re-recorded. My favorite live DVDs are the ones that are like, bootlegs where you hear the bad note, you hear the guy. It makes you feel like that's what that band really sounded like. It takes you to that time.
One of the best moments on Strangers in the Night, the UFO record.
Oh, yeah.
Is in Rock Bottom when Michael flubs the re-intro of the chorus.
Do you know the story behind that?
No, but I'm just, it's just classic.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. And do you know that that's one of the reasons why he quit the band? Because Ron Nevison, who produced that album, Michael wanted to re-record that, and Nevison wouldn't let him and said, no, we're actually making a live record here, which makes Strangers in the Night, which is probably...
I did not know that.
Yeah.
It's such a wealth of information.
Well, I don't know how useful it is, but... but yeah, so Nevison... Which Strangers in the Night is probably my favorite live album of all time, and what that makes it even more amazing that it truly is live. And Michael quit over that, and the story is that Michael was so pissed that Nevison wouldn't let him go in and touch up stuff in Rock Bottom. He was last seen walking out of the studio just shaking his head, going, Poor Rock Bottom. Poor Rock Bottom. Walking through the studio, and that was the last UFO saw of him.
That's sort of a sad story. The funny thing about Ron Nevison is Mike Klink was Ron Nevison's engineer.
Mike Klink, who did Appetite.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was an engineer originally, and so he was Ron Nevison's engineer. So he did like those Heart records and Jefferson Starship record, but one of the things he did early on was that UFO record.
For people that are,
But he never told me that story.
Oh, yeah, I saw Nevison tell that story, so, if you see him, ask him that. But
and actually, I've never heard anybody outside of this conversation I'm having with you talk about that flub, so I think Michael might have overreacted.
Exactly, I think so, too, but that was 1978, 79, so who knows? He could have been a different guy back then.
I'm sure he was.
Slash is joining me for a few more minutes here. It's Eddie Trunk, and the new album, Live on Stoke, is available, or Made in Stoke.
Live on Stoke, sounds like a drug. Live in Stoke. Yeah.
Made in Stoke,
yeah.
Is available now. It's a special edition CD, DVD set, or the standard double CD as well. I'll tell you, man, I'm glad you documented this. I'm glad you documented this band. As you know, I've seen a bunch of shows, and it's really one of the favorite things I've seen you do in a long time for me personally. And this band is so good, and you got such a cross-section of material on here, from Guns to Velvet Revolver to the last album to the Snake Pit stuff that I love. So, I mean, I would think that if you got a young fan out there and they wanted to know what Slash was about, this would be a good way to introduce them to your world, right?
I hadn't thought about that, but I suppose so. I mean, it's a good sort of overall, bird's eye view of everything. Yeah.
And I love, like I said, what you're doing, and I know you're making a full album now with this band.
I'm in the studio now.
Yeah, which I heard. When I saw you about a month ago, you played me 3 songs, which blew me away.
Right, and so we have 13 plus 1 that we haven't rehearsed yet, or haven't really finished arranging yet. So 14 altogether. So we've been running through the 13 songs, back to back every day, because we're going to do the album live. So you have to rehearse like crazy just to make sure that you know the songs, backwards and forwards, so you don't have to go back and fix anything. So it's going to be really cool setting. It's going to be very immediate. Well, you know what those 3 songs sounded like.
They were in your face and heavy and slamming. I mean, that's pretty much where you're going with the record, right?
Yeah, the whole record's like that.
Amazing. And unlike the last album where you had all these different singers, this album, you had the 2 with Miles on the last album, but this album will be Miles singing throughout, and that live band, which is so smoking, and I'm sure you're so dialed in with them now, it's going to make that studio experience just fly, I would think.
I mean, there was a moment when we first all collectively were down at Mates in the Valley and here in Southern California, and I mean, this was sort of a throw together band, and that first week of rehearsal before our first show, it had a certain chemistry and urgency to it, and I was really sort of like blown away by that whole thing. And so we started off doing a string of shows, and everything fell into place in a way that doesn't usually happen with a pickup band. So it's been sort of a blessing. And then, just touring all over the place. I mean, we did Asia twice, we did Australia 3 times, we did Europe twice, we did the States twice, and we did South America. And so by the end, all through that, we just got tighter and tighter. So at this point, we have a great sort of communication and collaboration kind of thing, just natural thing going. So writing these songs with Miles and working out the arrangements with the guys has been probably one of the most creatively inspiring times I've had in God knows how long.
2 more quick things, and I'll let you go, man. We're talking live with Slash. Get the new album, Made in Stoke, available now. I was thinking about this coming in because I am such a fan. I mean, I was a big fan of the Snake Pit stuff. I love some of that's on there, including the opening track, actually. But looking at what you're doing now, would it be safe to say that if Velvet Revolver hadn't imploded, that we probably wouldn't be getting this now? Like, in other words, if VR would have kept going and there would have been no issues there, do you think you would have still had time to do this sort of stuff?
Well, it probably wouldn't have happened, because in 2008, when everything went down with Scott, we got back to L.A., I think it was at the end of a European tour. He went one way and we went the other. And we came back and we got together and we auditioned a few people and wrote some songs and did all that. But I pretty much immediately went into my own sort of world, and I started working on a score for a movie. And then as I was doing that, I started writing. Out of the score, I found some of the stuff that I wrote that would make good songs. And I started, putting aside these song ideas. So when the score was done, I started working on, all this music that would make a good record. And I thought I wanted to do this thing where I would have all these friends of mine come in and sing or whatever. And that's where that came from. And so from that record, which was really just sort of a experimental project, a fun solo project for me, just to get away from the insanity of what was Velvet Revolver. And then it was like, okay, well, I'm doing a record, I got to do a tour, and that's turned into this whole thing leading up to where I am now. Yeah. So yeah, it wouldn't have happened had the band been fine. But ironically enough, when Velvet started, it was a very spontaneous thing that happened. I was starting to put together a band basically with the same concept of what I'm doing now, right? But I was just sort of playing. I was playing with a drummer from Black Crowes, Steve. What's his? I can't remember his last name. He's going to kill me.
No, I know. It's right there for me too, and I could run out the other.
We're going through a thing, and so he was available, and so I was jamming with him, and I was trying out a bass player, and I wrote a few songs, and I was headed in this direction, and then I hooked up